Postman Pat and the latest SDS regulations. Hiya, my name is Postman Pat, and this is a tale about the time I helped Mr. Taylor implement the new regulations regarding the submission of postal data to head office, using my knowledge of mean and variance. Once upon a time I worked for the Royal Mail, but they withdrew their backing a few years ago. Since then I've in theory been more freelance, but in practice I work for Mr. Ben Taylor as an employee of the Special Delivery Service. One day I was doing my rounds. I helped rescue Granny Dryden's goldfish from the burning oast house and Jeff Pringle's excise books from the lake. When I returned to the sorting office, Mr. Taylor was bemused and requiring of a sympathetic ear. "I've just had a request from head office. They need data about our service to justify financing it in the future. They're implementing austerity measures across the country, and nothing is safe. We need to provide information about the size of packages we're delivering by 5 o'clock. It seems that although Mr. Taylor was a good manager and leader, he wasn't as numerate as he liked us to believe. I, however, am quite the expert when it comes to using statistics. I told him I would explain how to calculate the mean and variance. There were 6 parcels on the table. Mr. Taylor picked them up one by one and put them on the scales. They weighed 40, 90, 100, 150, 180 and 220 grams. Meanwhile, I wrote the formulae for mean and variance on the board. Mr. Taylor got out his calculator and added the 6 masses, which was 780 grams, and the squares of the 6 masses, which was 123,000 grams squared. The mean mass is the sum of the masses of the parcels divided by the number of parcels, I said. Mr. Taylor divided his 780 grams by 6 and got 130 grams. The variance is a measure of spread which will show head office what a wide variety of parcels we have to deliver, I explained. Mr. Taylor divided the 123,000 by 6, which was 20,500, and from this he subtracted the square of the mean, 130, which gave him a variance of 3,600 grams squared. In the meantime, Jess had been lapping away at a saucer of Farmer Pottage's gold top. She looked askance at the board and came over to indicate that we hadn't quite completed our sums. She was quite right too. Headquarters didn't want the variance, they wanted the standard deviation. "Jess makes a valid point, Mr. Taylor," I told him. "The standard deviation is a more meaningful measure of spread. It's measured in the same units for a start." "How the blazes do you work out the standard deviation, Patrick?" Mr. Taylor asked of me in an exasperated manner, suggesting that he felt himself too superior to be outsmarted by a cat. "Standard deviation is simply the square root of the variance," I replied, safe in the knowledge that I deserved a pay rise, austerity measures or no austerity measures. Mr. Taylor quickly calculated the square root of 3,600. "It's 60 grams!" he exclaimed. Jess and I popped outside to play with string. It wasn't long, though, before Mr. Taylor came out in hysterics. "The scales are broken," he screamed. "It's measuring all the parcels incorrectly. We need to double all the masses and add on 30 as well. We'll have to start from scratch with all these sums." But Mr. Taylor was mistaken, uneducated as he is in the tools of linear functionality. It didn't take long to go through them. When the values are multiplied by A and then B is added, the mean is changed in exactly the same way. But variance is not affected by adding values, just multiplication. Having said that, since it is a squared function, we would need to multiply by the square of the multiplier. So if we need to double and add 30, the mean will now be 130 times 2 plus 30, which is 290 grams, whereas the variance will be 3,600 times 2 squared, which is 14,400 grams. And for completeness, the standard deviation will be 60 times 2, which is 120 grams. Crisis averted, we focused our attention on the data we needed to submit. Mr. Taylor still looked a little bit concerned. "I've just checked on the computer, and there were 50 parcels delivered last week. It's going to take ages to use your formula to find the standard deviation for all of them. And not only that, the data is grouped," he said. "Do you have a spreadsheet package on your computer, Mr. Taylor?" I asked impertinently, but he replied in the negative, blaming a virus he had accidentally downloaded from an email the previous month. Fortunately, there was an efficient method to find the standard deviation for group data, and I relayed this to him. All we do is calculate the midpoint of each group and take this value to represent the mass of each parcel in the group. Then all we have to do is insert F's into the appropriate places in the existing formulae. I would, however, recommend putting the data into a table to make the process simpler. On my request, Mr. Taylor put the data into the table I gave him and calculated the missing values and relevant totals with his yellow crayon. Mr. Taylor then used these formulae to calculate the mean and variance for this group data, remembering of course to square root the variance at the end. It was 4:58 p.m. Mr. Taylor hurriedly phoned head office and gave them the figures. It turned out that our district was one of the more profitable districts in the local area, and we both received performance-related bonuses. Jess received a new red collar. Another adventure has ended for me, Postman Pat, my black and white cat Jess, and my encyclopedic knowledge of statistics.